Two guys in the dark.
This happened my 10th grade year. I was just a normal girl, kind of a tomboy, but still feminine enough for the boys not to be turned off by me. I was into a lot of stuff that the boys were into. I enjoyed fishing, hunting, canoeing, camping, and stuff like that. I had a decent-sized friend group, and we were all tight with each other. I was in love with Brad. Brad was the cutest guy in school. He was a football star quarterback. He was an all-around athlete. He was smart. He dressed well. He had beautiful blonde hair, brown eyes, and a nice chiseled body. The bell had rang, and I got a glimpse of Brad coming out of the gym class with his shirt and his abs glistening in the sun. Next thing I knew, Kelly pushes me on the back of my head really hard, called me a fucking slut. I was pissed off, but I ignored her and decided against breaking her jaw. Brad looked up, caught me looking at him. I quickly looked away, then sneaked a peek back to see him give me a smirk. I took this as a sign that he was aware of the fact that I was into him. Later on during lunch, I was standing in the lunch line. I saw Kelly and her friends talking about something. Then I looked to my left. I saw two black girls having a conversation about Kelly and her friends. One of the black girls was crying because Jennifer had slammed her head into a locker earlier. I wasn't sure what was going on, but from what I gathered, Jennifer did it because Shannon was black, and Shannon's best friend Shalonda was talking about beating Kelly's ass after school. I decided to butt out of everything. As I was walking to a place to sit down and eat lunch, Shalonda asked me if I was okay, chatting with me for a little bit, told me about Shannon, and how she was going to beat Kelly's ass after school, and that Kelly was a racist bitch, which Shalonda wasn't lying about Kelly being racist. Last year, Kelly and her boyfriend Joey were hanging out with this guy Greg. Greg and Shalonda had started dating. Greg is white, and Shalonda happens to be black. Joey and Kelly told Craig that they can't hang out with them anymore because he was dating a black girl. Joey and Kelly said a bunch of racist shit, even threatened Shalonda and Greg. Greg stopped hanging out with Joey and Kelly altogether. When fourth period came, I saw Brad, and I froze, stuck like a deer in the headlights as he stood before me. I stood confident and anticipated him walking towards me. My palms were sweaty, and I was nervous. Brad opens up his mouth. I eagerly listened for his seductive words. And then, "Get out of my way, you ugly fucking bitch." He shoves me on the ground as he barrels right through me like I'm not even a person. I sat on the ground confused, hurt, and heartbroken. All the things that I thought about Brad were wrong. He's just a douchebag steroid-popping asshole. Shalonda helped me up. We went to the girls' bathroom to go smoke a joint. I was complaining about how much of a piece of shit asshole Brad is. Shalonda was talking about how she hopes that she don't kill Kelly because she doesn't want to go to jail. We talked about family and other things. Then we hugged and went to our next classroom. As I was sitting in class, Marty brings a letter up to the desk. It's from Brad. The letter says that I would never date an ugly troll-looking woman like you. You'd be lucky to lick dog shit off of my shoes. I can't believe you actually thought that you had a chance with me. I was devastated. This letter was designed and written to hurt me and put me back where I belong, in a box of other rejects and losers. I cried. Then suddenly, Sherry starts making fun of me and pulls my hair. Tim bends down and taunts me by talking perverted shit that he wants to do to me, and how he was going to teach me a thing or two. Later that night when I got home, I called my friend Katie and told her what had happened today. Katie comforts me. The next day at school, I saw Kelly storm by with a black eye, and then I saw Shalonda. And then she gave me a look, as if I was asking if she hit her. Shalonda motioned back like she didn't know what had happened. At PE, I heard Kelly telling Megan that her father hit her because she wouldn't give him a blowjob. I was seriously thinking, what the fuck just happened? I was walking to my next class when suddenly I'm pulled into the boys' bathroom. Brad is standing right in front of me. I'm nervous and shaking. Brad then says to me, "So I hear that you like me. If you like me, then prove it to me." He starts to stroke himself. He then proceeds to tell me how I am a nasty woman, that I would never be anything more than a side whore. He then walks off. I lean against the wall and wait for my tears to stop running. As I'm walking out, Gary, a guy that I have second period with, says to me, "If you want to put a stop to it, I will." I didn't quite understand what he meant, but he sounded genuinely concerned about me, like he was talking about killing the guy. I thanked Gary for his kindness and then went to class. Brad and his friends blocked both sides of the hall, and I was trapped. I thought the absolute worst. I was terrified that I was going to be raped by Brad and his 7 or 8 friends. Then I feel an egg hit my face hard, then dozens at a time. They stood there and throw eggs at me. I was covered in egg yolk. They all started to laugh and joke about how I was stupid and how I should kill myself. I walked home that day, and on the way home I tried to figure out what I did wrong and why they were treating me this way. I couldn't come up with any answers. Fast forward a few months. It's the last day before Christmas break, and everyone is talking about how they hope that they get what they want for Christmas. I see Gary from the distance. I go over to him and ask him how he's doing. We chat for a little bit. "I have to tell you something, Gary," I said nervously. Gary looks at me, then lifts my chin. "What is it that you need to tell me?" So I tell Gary how they throw eggs at me, and asked him not to lose his shit. Gary was angry and wanted to kill Brad and his friends. During 6th period PE class, Brad was running track, and Gary was just screwing around, playfully kicking his friends. Brad runs across the field and starts wailing on Gary. Gary is beaten senseless, and Brad runs off before the admins or the SRO showed up. Gary is pretty bruised up, and he is murmuring profanities and his desires to slit Brad's throat. Gary tells me that he's going to kill Brad, and that I couldn't stop him. I tried to tell Gary to just let it go, that it isn't worth it. Later on, Gary contemplates his final decision. Is he going to become a criminal and murder Brad or go to prison for the rest of his life? Or is he going to snap back to reality? The clock ticks by with each passing tick, tick, tick. Gary is becoming annoying by the ticking and smashes the clock. Gary calls and says that he has made his decision. I turn on the news, and Brad is on the news. I tell Gary. Gary turns on the news, and he is livid. So Brad had gone out to Shannon's house, tried to force himself on her, and also hit her a few times. Apparently told her a bunch of racist stuff. Someone had told Shannon's cousin, who was a gangbanger, and Brad was shot 57 times at a red light by unknown assailants. So after everything that Brad had done to me and Gary, and the things that he did to the others, especially Shannon, Brad got what he deserved. Shalonda beat Kelly's ass because Kelly called her the N-word in front of the whole school, because Kelly thought that Shalonda wouldn't defend herself, or Kelly thought that if she needed help that someone would help her. No one did. We just stood there as Shalonda brutalized Kelly. Kelly laid on the ground a bloody mess. Her friends just kind of walked past her because they were ashamed of her getting her ass kicked. Kelly had later on moved. Joey got stabbed by Gary because Joey ran him off the road and almost killed his little sister and his infant brother. Gary stabbed Joey 43 times in the chest, in the back, and anywhere else that he could get him. Gary is now in prison, and I feel bad for Gary. Gary had gotten a sentence of 8 years for second-degree murder, but he could get out sooner. Gary writes me every day and tells me that he doesn't have sympathy for murdering Joey. I tell him that I don't have sympathy for Brad either, but I am deeply saddened that he is in prison, and I miss him so much. This is something that happened to me 5 or so years ago. I was fresh out of university with my degree in international development. I wanted to help undeserved communities, develop meaningful projects, and see more of the world. I was young, I was naive, eager to get started. I took one of my first jobs that offered me a position. It wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, but it was adjacent to my interests, and more important, took me to a place that I'd never been before. I loved everything when I arrived. It was beautiful, sunny, and green. My new coworkers, all local staff, were amazing and so kind. My boss invited me to play soccer on Sundays with his family. My fellow project coordinator would go out dancing with me on the weekends. My roommate, a fellow expat working in development as well, was a fun and spunky woman that I adored. I felt so blessed. Then one day, it changed. I was walking downtown with a friend. There was a vegetable and fruit market that had great, fresh produce directly from the farmers growing it. It was about a 20-minute bus ride from my apartment. So not close, but not incredibly far either. My friend and I loaded up and began walking over to a quiet corner to call a cab to help us haul our goods back. Then I heard it. Hey, miss. Then I heard my exact address. It took me a second to realize that he was shouting my address. I turned around to see a man hanging out of his car, slowly crawling along the road with us. My friend recognized my address too. She turned to me and asked, "Do you know him?" I've never seen him before. He just kept on shouting, "Hey you, you're living in the back house on the second floor, right?" That made it even worse. I lived on a big suburban lot with two houses, one in the front where my landlady and her family lived, and the second in the back house. The second house was split into two apartments. The bottom floor housed two students, while I lived on the second floor with my roommate. You couldn't see the second house from the road, much less the stairway that led to the second floor. My heart was pounding. I wanted to shout back at the guy, but I was scared. I was a 22-year-old woman living in a foreign country, and I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't know how people would react. I didn't know how he would react, so we walked. My friend tried to comfort me, saying that maybe he knew my landlady's family. I was probably the only redhead in the whole country. He would be a neighbor I hadn't met. The encounter didn't leave me. It stayed in my mind. A week or so had passed. I stopped glancing behind my back whenever a car would drive by. I started to feel secure. Then he showed up again. I was walking home from work. It was getting dark. My office was a 15 to 20-minute stroll from my apartment, perfect as a quick way to stretch my legs. I was halfway home when I felt someone watching me. Then, the slow crawl of a car idling up beside me. I knew that it was him without even looking. "Miss," and then my address again, he said, leaning out of his window, one hand on the wheel. "Why, are you shy?" I ignored him and kept on walking. There was no one around. It was getting dark. "Come on," he said. "Let me give you a ride. I know where you live." Not reassuring. I started to feel my chest tighten. I wanted to call someone, but I didn't know what he'd do if I reached for my phone. I was practically jogging now, but he just sped up to match my pace. "Listen, bitch." Now he was angry. His voice was hard. "You don't just ignore a man like that." I wondered what I'd do if he stopped the car. He looked fit, young. He could probably catch me. He could hurt me. So I did something that, in retrospect, seemed absolutely bizarre. I yelled at him, wildly, rapidly. I did it in my first language, not that they spoke this in this country. Not a language that he would ever have heard, probably. I screamed curse words and threats, anything that I could think of. I'll never forget the confused fury on his face. But he did slow down, letting me run ahead. I could see a woman at a bus stop at the intersection ahead. If I got to her, maybe she could help me. Maybe he'd get scared off. By the time that I got to the woman, he was gone. I kept walking home, looking behind me with every step. I told my roommate about what had happened. She told me not to bother reporting it to the police, since they were corrupt and wouldn't do anything. When I told my boss, he told me the same. He said he had a baseball bat and would come whenever I called. I saw the man again 2 weeks later. He was sitting in his car, parked in front of the gates to my apartment. I was about to take out the trash, but retreated before he could see me. I told my landlady, and when she went over to confront him, he drove off. This continued for weeks, not every day, but once or twice a week. He was already there, waiting. I took cabs to and from work. I never traveled alone. I barely slept, waiting for him to break in and kill me. The last weekend abroad, he almost did. I went out drinking with a group of my friends, 4 of us in total. We were celebrating the end of my contract, and I was happy to go home in a few days. I couldn't wait to see my family. I couldn't wait to put an ocean between me and that man. We had beers at a local bar. a 5 to 10 minute walk max from my apartment. When it started to get late, probably around 1 o'clock, we tried to get a cab, but it was impossible. The roads were jammed, and people were everywhere outside. Cabs couldn't even get to us. Or so we thought. Even though others warned us not to. Let's walk home. It would be faster than calling a cab. We'll be fine. We're a group of 4. No one will hassle us. We got halfway there when we had to cross a main road. There were no street lights. Not that kind of place. The road was absolutely empty. Not a single car was in sight. We crossed the road. A few more minutes, but then we were backlit with a bright headlight of a car coming up. We glanced back. It was a cop car. 2 men in the front, and I knew, even though I couldn't see from the bright lights in my eyes, he was driving. He was a fucking cop. The Jeep slowed, as I knew it would. He rolled down the window to drawl. "Hey, miss," and then my address again. "Nice night, yeah?" My friends immediately knew who he was. I could see how nervous they were. We were alone on a dark, empty street, in the middle of the night. They were cops. So they were armed. No one would intervene, probably. It would be too dangerous. "You girls need a ride?" he leered. His friend, who I could now see, was grinning hugely. My last few days, I thought, and this is how it would end. We sped up our pace. I don't know what our plan was, other than to get away. When I heard one of the doors of the Jeep open as the passenger jumped out, I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. Although I didn't dare turn back to see. We were at the turn to my street. 2 minutes more to get to safety. The car was right behind us. Whoever had gotten out of the car was right behind us. 2 of my friends were ahead now, while another clutched my hand and dragged me along. Then, out of nowhere, another car appeared. They were coming from the opposite direction. When they slowed to see what was going on, I've never been so grateful. It was an older couple, and they looked concerned. I think they knew something bad was about to happen. I heard, not saw, the car door swing open. I almost got hit as they sped past us in a hurry. The other car had stayed, watching. They offered to escort us home, driving alongside just in case. But I knew he wouldn't come back. Not tonight, at least. I still took a cab with my friends to their place for the night. We took my roommate with us, just in case. Nothing happened after that. My last 2 days were uneventful, although I couldn't shake the feeling that he might show up at any given moment. Driving to the airport, all packed up and ready to go home, my cab got pulled over by a cop. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't him, although it could have been. It wasn't until I got on the plane, until I landed in my home country, that I finally felt that terror leave me. I still get nervous when cars drive up behind me, when men roll down their windows to shout at me. It's never him, but still, you never know. Let's not meet again, stranger who knows where I live. This happened in 2004 when I was in the United States Army. I was stationed somewhere in the Middle East, and then transferred somewhere else. Then when I got to China, well, over in China, there were other U.S. personnel. I happened to look over, and I have seen Private Jenkins and some older gentlemen talking. There was an Asian woman that looked like she was under the influence of something. Private Jenkins was talking to the guy, and then I heard Private Jenkins give the man a wad of cash. And then the guy gave Jenkins what looked like some type of powdery drug. Jenkins escorted the woman to his room, and the woman kept asking him who he was and where they were going. Jenkins kept looking around, making sure that he was having no one follow him. Although he was unaware of my presence, Jenkins shoves her inside. I walk down the hall, and then I hear the woman screaming. I bust in the room, and Jenkins is naked. She is sitting in the corner crying. I start punching him in the face. Then all of a sudden, other U.S. personnel come in and come up to break us up. The sergeant comes in. "What the fuck is going on in here?" "Jenkins, what the fuck is going on?" I answer to the sergeant. "Sir, I caught Jenkins trying to force himself on this Chinese citizen." The sergeant looked at the poor woman laying in the corner, crying and embarrassed. Sergeant Giles pulls out his gun and escorts Jenkins back to base. Jenkins is convicted of rape, and he was discharged. After Jenkins left, I finished up my career in the Army. retired from the Army, and became a contractor. I was driving down the road one day, and I seen a guy walking down the road. I couldn't place my finger on who it was. I thought hard, and nothing was registering in my mind. I stopped at the gas station to get gas, and then I get back into my car. I hear the sound of a gun being cocked back. Hello, Hudgens. Nice to fucking see you. Today I won't forget this day. Do you know what the fuck today is? A familiar voice echoed into my mind. It was Private First Class Jenkins, dishonorably discharged for rape and attempted murder. I was a bit surprised. I won't say that I was afraid, because we as soldiers are trained not to be afraid and to handle the worst situations in a calm and efficient way. Jenkins demands that I drive. He kept the gun to the back of my head. As we turned the corner to go down I-75, Jenkins asked me, "Do you have a wife, Hudgens?" I didn't want to answer this question. Jenkins pistol whacked me and asked me again in a more aggressive tone. I told him yes. Jenkins made rude and disrespectful comments about my wife and the kids. He threatened to do all kinds of things to my wife and the kids. Jenkins was mad because I had ruined his military career, according to him. I explained to him that committing a crime and brutalizing an innocent civilian was definitely not the right thing to do. Jenkins screamed racist shit at me about Asians, and he kept going back to that day that I got him and he lost his career. He told me how he had to sleep at a homeless shelter, and now he can't even be honored for the shit that he did in the Army. Now I must at least try to be fair to Jenkins. Yes, he did try to rape a Chinese woman and was discharged from the Army. Jenkins was also a very brave soldier and has survived heavy enemy fire, complete damn near impossible missions, things like that. Jenkins bragged about all the things he did. Then he said, I could have had everything that I ever wanted, but instead some fucking goody two-shoes cuck motherfucker had to come and cock-block me and get me a dishonorable discharge. I interjected, yes, you were a good soldier, and you survived things that most never would have. You were a great marksman, but you victimized an innocent person and had to face justice. Jenkins then told me to pull over and get into the passenger seat. As he got into the driver's seat, Jenkins was nervous and giddy. He was sweaty and smelled like cat piss. As Jenkins fiddled around in the driver's seat looking for something, I don't know what, he just wouldn't say. I began to think about my wife and what would happen if my daughter never got to see her father again. I began to look for a way out of this. Jenkins was high as a kite and didn't know what he was doing, or it seemed that way. Jenkins then drives to some random house. You see that bitch over there? Jenkins asked. I stayed quiet. You're going to rape her? And then I'm going to call the police on you, and you're going to go to prison, Jenkins continued. Jenkins, listen, man, I'm not going to hurt that woman, I replied. Jenkins then murmurs a bit, mumbles about some other nonsense. Then he looks at me, looks back at that woman, and tells me to get out of the car. I get out, and he pushes me forward towards the woman's house. He started singing some disgusting song that he came up with. It was vulgar and downright sickening to listen to. Jenkins then tells me that he was going inside and to wait here. He then chains me to a pole. He goes into the house. I hear the woman screaming, and then Jenkins throws her outside by her hair, and she falls down onto the ground. She looks at Jenkins, looks at me. She is confused and utterly terrified. He then tells the woman how he was discharged from the Army and how it was my fault, because I didn't mind my own business. The woman begs Jenkins to let her go. Jenkins hits her with her fist and tells her to be quiet. He then explains to the woman that because I ruined his career, that he was going to ruin my life and reputation by forcing me to rape her. Jenkins wanted to make it to where I wouldn't be allowed to see my daughter, and he started making comments about my daughter and how he wasn't above fucking kids too. I jumped at him, only to be restrained by the handcuffs that binded my movement. Jenkins then forced the woman to remove her clothing, forced me to remove my clothing, and tells me that if I don't do it, that he will shoot me right there, and shoot her, and would torture my wife and daughter. I looked at the woman and stood up. The woman began to scream and begged me not to hurt her. I just told her that I have no choice. She kept on screaming. Jenkins was getting excited by this. I told the woman to just lay still, and it will be over soon. Jenkins then looks at me and at her. Then he commands me to begin. He looks away briefly, and I was able to snatch the gun from his hand. He begged me not to shoot him. I told him to walk, and that I wasn't going to murder him in cold blood. Jenkins is then taken back to town, and I tell the authorities about Jenkins. They lock him up immediately. The woman thanks me. I get on the elevator, and Jenkins is inside the elevator. He shoots me in the spine and cripples me. It's been a few years, and my back is starting to heal. I'm getting to where I can walk again. I'm at the point where I'm about to murder him. I don't care about honor anymore. Being in this hospital, I have come to the realization that all of these promises of honor, respect, and all that other shit is just a selling point to get meathead teenagers that think that they're badasses to join the military. The military did nothing for me the whole time that I have been in this hospital. I fought for this country just so, whatever I need, I am treated like a second-rate citizen. I have bed sores, and I haven't eaten a decent meal in months. Jenkins shows up at the hospital. He walks right past me, tells me that he owns the hospital, and that he's going to make me suffer. He then walks off. I don't see Jenkins for the rest of the time that I am there. A few months go by, nothing, so I forget all about him. I lay down to go to sleep, and about 2 hours later my daughter gets a phone call. "Here, Daddy, it's for you." Who is it? I'm wondering. I really don't know who it is. I stick the phone to my ear. I don't make a sound. I just slowly observe the surroundings. I then slowly reply, "If this is Jenkins, I'm going to find you, and then kill you." Jenkins hangs up the phone, and then I hear a gunshot. I see my front door has a bullet in it. I got to my safe and pull out my gun. I tell my wife and daughter to get down into the cellar, and don't open it until I say so. They hurry down there. Jenkins shoots me in the arm. I drop my gun. Jenkins walks out from the shadows, cocky and upright with a smile on his face. He leans down and gets into my face, says that I bet your wife has good pussy. I had to get free, but I was unable to. Jenkins then looks back at me, says that I bet your daughter has a good one too. I closed my eyes and prayed. I was in severe pain, and I could have died at any moment. I look up, and I see a security guard sneaking around. He sees me. I motion for him to call for backup. Jenkins then tells me that he lost the only reason that he had to live, and that he simply wouldn't allow me to live. He didn't want to live up to what he did. Instead, he blamed me for getting discharged from the military. I blamed me because he didn't want to take responsibility for his own actions, which I told him that a soldier who doesn't own up to his mistakes is no soldier at all. And just as I hear him turn a corner, I hear a loud gunshot. I feel my chest, and I'm shocked that there is no blood. I turn around, and it is the Asian woman's daughter. She is a cop, and she just blew Jenkins' heart out of his chest. The Asian woman's mother, which was Jenkins' victim, told her about how I had saved her life, and if it wasn't for me, the daughter wouldn't be here. The police arrive, and they question me. The Asian woman and I explain everything to them. They are unsure on how to pursue the investigation. While they are doing that, I just call an old army friend, and I'll be out of the station very soon. The following is a very true experience. I've never actually wrote this down before, and I don't know if anyone has ever experienced this too. This happened between 1989 and 1990, and I was about the age of 4 years old. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it, and I wonder if in some way unknown, it has changed me. My parents had a house in the inland empire of Southern California, and at the time, my brother hadn't been born yet, so I was still the only child. To give you a layout, my parents' house has a 2-story house located on a cul-de-sac. On the bottom floor, there were 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, the living room, and the kitchen. The second floor was just the master bedroom and bath, and all you could see from the street was the garage and one of the bedroom windows on the bottom floor, and the window of my mom's bathroom on the second floor. To get to the front door, you had to walk along the cement pathway that ran alongside the house. You had to pass the first bedroom that you can see from the street. Then you passed the bathroom window, and then another bedroom window, and then you would be at the front door. The backyard was beyond that point. My bedroom at the time was the bedroom next to the front door. Now, for some reason, my blinds weren't completely down to the bottom of the window. There was about a 6-inch gap with nothing covering it. I was pretty young, so I didn't really care much about it then. The bed was in the middle of the wall across from my bedroom door, and to the left was the window. According to my mom, this all happened right before midnight. My mother was asleep in her room upstairs, and my dad was a policeman that worked nights in another city. I was fast asleep in my room, and out of nowhere, I suddenly woke. Looking up at the ceiling, I don't know what woke me, or if I just popped awake on my own. After my eyes adjusted to the nightlight of my bedroom, I sat up and stared, looking around my room. All of a sudden, something caught my eye at the window, in the gap. First, I thought it was the street light reflecting on the window, but I knew for a fact that there was only one street light, and what I was looking at was obviously glowing spots that were spaced apart as if someone's face. Then I thought, is that a cat looking at me? And yes, I vividly remember thinking things like this, trying to debunk this at 4 years old. I had remembered then that my cat Chelsea's eyes would reflect at night, but this looked different than that. The cat's eyes would almost have different colors when reflecting. These were two very solid, bright, white, glowing eyes, looking straight at me. I just stared at them, frozen stiff, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. I couldn't see a face at all. The eyes were just so bright, nothing else stood out. That void, or face around the eyes, looked blacker than the night. I thought again, well, if this is a cat, how would a cat be big like a person? And why would a cat stand up to stare in my bedroom? The curiosity got me, and I went for it. I flipped the covers off, turned my little 4-year-old body towards the window, put my feet on the floor. This is the moment that the creepiest thing has happened, and it will forever be burned into my brain. I got off the bed, got on my knees to get a closer look at what this so-called cat was, when at that very moment, this faceless pair of glowing white eyes began to slowly and steadily tilt to the side, very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween. Eyes still locked on me, not blinking once. The feeling of dread and fear shot through my body, completely terrified. I burst into tears immediately, booked it down the hallway, through the living room, and up the stairs to go tell my mom. Although I was going as fast as I could, I felt like it took forever. When I got to my mom, I was so upset. I couldn't get any words out. Tears were streaming down my face, and my mom was becoming seriously concerned at this point. She was able to calm me down just enough for me to get out the words, There is white eyes looking at me through my window, on the bottom. Stutter crying very hard. Are you sure? My mom asked. I cry out loud, Yes! She didn't even go down to look. She just called the police. I don't remember the time that it took for them to arrive, or what they said, because I finally fell asleep in my mom's bed. I do remember faintly waking up to a knock on the door, and my mom going to open it. The cop speaks to her, and I hear her say, Okay, thank you, good night. She shuts the door. Did they finally find it, Mommy? I asked, half asleep. No, honey. He said that they couldn't find anyone. My mom had told me this softly. It's okay now. Just try to go back to sleep. It's safe to say that that next day, my whole window was covered. Years fast forward. I'm in middle school now. Every now and then I would think about that night. Sometimes I wondered if that moment was real, if those eyes were really there, those unforgettable white eyes. One day a random thought came up. I asked my mom if she remembered that night. She tells me yes, of course. Why? I don't know. Just wondering, I guess, I had said to her. Then my mom proceeds to say, Well, I never told you this, but when the deputy came out that night, he told me that they made it a priority to get out of our house as soon as they could, because not very long before I called 911, they received another call from someone else reporting that someone was looking in their window in our same neighborhood. Hearing that sent chills down my spine, and to this day, I wonder who or what was looking at me that night.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.